For example, we think that if we find a boyfriend, we'll feel love. We think that, if we get this degree, then we'll feel sort of accomplishment and fulfillment, maybe. But these things don't actually come from those physical things. They have to be manifested internally. So before you get to loving yourself and valuing yourself, before you get there, before you get to that dream body of yours, you have to take that step. You have to get that emotion. You have to follow that emotion before you can get those physical results that you desire. And those physical results aren't going to equate to that emotion. What we have to do is we have to chase these emotions. We have to chase these instinctive, natural urges to feel certain ways. That's what we need to chase. You are you. So don't do what society tells everyone else to do, because everyone else isn't you. Does that make sense? Just live your life. Just be happy, be healthy. Don't do the conventional safe thing for the sake of that. Do what's going to make you happy.
I was having a conversation here with my Chinese teacher in Chinese. She knows that I like to practice political and philosophical vocabulary. So she asks me some sort of provocative questions about the meaning of life and how society is organized sometimes. And I'm answering in Chinese, but I'm struggling, of course, to give a meaningful answer in Chinese. And, recently she was asking me a question along those lines and about how the younger generation, she suggested that the younger generation today has the wrong ideas and therefore is not pursuing social progress. Literally in Chinese, they have the wrong ideas. And I said to her, I honestly do not think that the problem is that the younger generation has the wrong ideas. I think they don't know how to implement ideas. And this conversation went on again in very simple Chinese. And I said, honestly, it doesn't matter to me if we're talking about younger people or if we're talking about older people like my grandmother. I really believe that anyone who is living for their own happiness is not living a life of duty or virtue or social responsibility. And, very sort of harsh truth, but she agreed about that. And, I talked a little bit about my grandmother, and I talked about how hard it is to be a teenager also. I can relate to both. But, it may sound tremendously harsh and judgmental, but my problem is really the same whether we're talking about my grandmother or we're talking about young people being on permanent vacation. My problem is not just with the permanent vacation. I really do see the idea of living for your own happiness, short-term and long-term, as a fundamentally distorting and myopic approach to life on Earth. As something that cuts you off from any form of meaningful social engagement or even adopting meaningful responsibility in a profession. I don't really think you can become a surgeon in pursuit of this idea of self-love and your own happiness. Or if you do, I think you're going to be a lousy surgeon. I think there's a tremendous difference between someone who becomes a school teacher just for money or just to make themselves feel good, short-term or long-term, and someone who becomes a school teacher who has a deep sense of commitment and obligation to that neighborhood where they've chosen to be a school teacher, to the children in that neighborhood, maybe to the disadvantaged children, maybe just all the children, I don't know, or even a commitment to building that school as an institution where they feel that school is a special institution and they care about the future of that institution as something important above and beyond individual students, individual teachers such as themselves, above and beyond the paycheck. And there have been many social science studies on that question, on how those differences in personal motivation end up producing measurable differences in outcomes. Short-term self-interest of individuals does not build great institutions, does not deliver great medical services to people who need them, and does not deliver great education to the next generation either. I feel like a jerk saying this stuff, I do. Just now in the lineup for me to get my vegan food, one of the other students here, he said to me a friendly way, he said, "Hey, what's up?" Because he knows I like to use the phrase "what's up." I said, "Hey," and he said, "All right, so you're still pretending to be a jerk, aren't you?" Said, what do you mean pretending? I thought I really was a jerk. What are you talking about? And he was of the opinion that really I'm a nice guy and I pretend to be a jerk to keep my distance from the other students here. Yeah, well, some truth to that, but on some level, I think I'm a real jerk also. I think you've got to be a jerk. When I was a child, I looked at my grandmother in her retirement, and I saw someone who was playing tennis, going on vacation, living a life of self-indulgence. And I saw my own grandmother as someone who had totally abdicated any sense of social responsibility, any engagement with the problems in her own society in Canada, let alone global or ecological or what have you. And I saw her as someone who had given up any sense of responsibility even for me. She really wasn't a grandmother to me. She wasn't concerned about my education or my future or helping me in any way. She wasn't concerned about the very real problems in my own family, my own nuclear family. And in a very real sense, I think she was a bad person. She did, memorably, donate money to Greenpeace. If you don't know Greenpeace, you can Google them. They're an ecological charity. They're environmental activists of some sort. And, if ever the subject of ecology came up, around the dinner table, when I saw my grandmother, she could invoke this to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing my part for the environment." I donate money to Greenpeace. And there are a lot of people who eat meat every day. Of course, she ate meat every day. Her generation, for whom that kind of thing is the moral fig leaf. Is, I gave money at the office. But for me, I don't especially stigmatize teenagers. I don't especially stigmatize the people who are wearing a bikini on the internet to earn a living more than I do someone who's a dentist or a doctor or works at Starbucks, does any other kind of job. It's true that on a deep level, I just do not believe in personal happiness as the meaning of life. And I think that is, dangerous narcissism. Whereas someone who seems self-confident and collected in talking about something they have every reason to be self-confident and collected in talking about, I don't see that as indicating narcissism at all.
What we have to do is we have to chase these emotions. We have to chase these instinctive, natural urges to feel certain ways. That's what we need to chase. And it's harder said than it's easier said than done, obviously. Like, for example, how do you start to just love yourself? How do you start to just value yourself? It's hard, but it's a daily practice.
The accusation of narcissism gets thrown around a lot on the internet. And it's interesting to me because some of the reasons why people accuse me of being a narcissist are, from my perspective, not indications of narcissism. They're actually indications of the exact opposite. They indicate a pragmatic, down-to-earth attitude. Being willing to talk about yourself in the first person, having the self-confidence, talk about yourself, talk about what you want, your concerns, does not in and of itself indicate narcissism. And on the contrary, refusal to be honest about the first person, about who you are, about the role you yourself play in the equation you're portraying, can conceal narcissism.
It manifests itself in different ways for everyone, for different people. For me, loving myself means being easy on myself.
I'm going to read here a comment from YouTube, public comment. Sophie commented, "I did not care for you or your channel when I first came across it because you struck me as being extremely narcissistic." Ask the question, what does that mean? "But you've definitely grown on me, and I've subscribed. While I don't agree with everything you say in your videos, the content is interesting, educational, thought-provoking, and in general quality content. So thank you for that." So here's my response. Obviously, many people just send me narcissism as an insult without any turnaround or any reflection on it. Here's the response I wrote. "To be honest, I think that you and many members of our generation need to re-examine what they mean by narcissistic. The fact that my self-confidence may make you feel weak neither means that I'm narcissistic, nor does it invalidate my opinions or the value of my content in any way. Judging someone as worthless or just disregarding them because they have a lot of self-confidence is deeply flawed for the same reasons that disregarding someone because they lack self-confidence would be. In fact, it's even worse because it is natural and normal for people to have self-confidence when they talk about something they know about, are passionate about, and when they feel they have something valuable to offer you. And, by the way, on an infinite number of topics, I'm aware that I have no knowledge, no passion, and nothing to offer. Thus, e.g., I don't make YouTube videos about the politics of Africa or the Caribbean all that often. Okay. So what I'm suggesting here is that seeing self-confidence and treating it as narcissism is a mistake, especially when I'm the one choosing the topic of the conversation. I'm simply not choosing to talk about topics that I'm deeply uncomfortable discussing or that I lack confidence to. Sometimes I do on this channel. Sometimes to challenge myself, I intentionally choose things where I'm kind of pushing my own limits, where I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable on camera. And I'm choosing topics that I'm not that comfortable speaking about. That also reflects my background in the theater. If you're in theater, even doing stand-up comedy or something, often you really want to push that limit rather than just speak on topics where you're 100% confident and comfortable. But confidence, I think, is unrelated to what's really problematic about narcissism. Because narcissism is not a useless concept. It's not a meaningless insult. I see many, many vegans on the internet who lack self-confidence, but whose entire content is premised on the implicit assumption that their personal happiness is everything in this world. And that, to me, is really the malignant and dangerous element of narcissism.
Loving myself means showing myself some empathy, being easy on myself, and just listening to myself.
So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that when you peg your happiness and any kind of mental state to a physical reality, you're just never going to be happy.
Why do I see so many young women and young men speaking as if their love for themselves were their primary political problem, philosophical problem, their primary mission in life? That feeling good about themselves, that loving themselves is their main objective or their only objective. To me, that really communicates the malignant aspects of narcissism, even if they have no self-confidence, even if they don't consider themselves beautiful or intelligent or powerful or influential, even if they lack self-discipline, even if there are no topics on which they are as comfortable speaking as I am comfortable speaking about, Laos or Cambodia or something. Again, if I'm talking to you about the politics of the Caribbean, I'm a lot less confident because I've done this much reading on it, in contrast to other parts of the world where I've done a lot of reading. You want to talk to me about how difficult it is studying a language like Chinese or Cree or Japanese or, my experience with language education or what have you. Sure, you're going to get a relaxed, self-confident opinion that to me does not suggest narcissism or not the dangerous or malignant aspects of narcissism. There's a real difference between saying, this is what I want, this is who I am, these are my concerns, and saying, this is real veganism, this is fake veganism. If you don't agree with me, you're a fake vegan. If you watch my video on community, in that video on community, I say again and again, this is what I want. This is what I'm concerned about for my future. Here's what I'm concerned about when my own grandparents go into a retirement home, or when I go into a retirement home, or when my daughter needs to go to school, etc., etc. Here's what I want in my life. Here's what I'm worried about. Is that an indication of narcissism? Yeah, I want a real community. Yeah, I want it all. From cradle to the grave, the lawyers to the political organization, to having that foundation that's respected enough that when there's a controversy in government, the newspapers know who to call. Maybe there are several foundations for them to call, where there's a voice advocating for veganism in Parliament, in the newspapers, on the street. Yeah, I want it, and I'm willing to recognize I don't have it. That's real community. And we're going to have to work real hard to get it. What if I had phrased all of the same statements in that video? I mean, it's very intentional that I say, this is what I want. And the reason is that it's with all due humility that I'm aware this may not be what you want. This may not be for everyone. This is not something that defines all of veganism, not by any means. And you can imagine how different the whole video would sound if instead it proposed the same argument in terms of this is what veganism means, right? And if you don't believe in this, if you're not pursuing or supporting this, then you're not a real vegan, you're a fake vegan. Quite a few people on the internet are playing that game. I'm not satisfied with what you guys call a community. I'm not satisfied with a bunch of self-indulgent middle-aged people sitting around on Facebook giving each other the thumbs up. Or, I'm not satisfied with a bunch of teenagers on Instagram photographing their asses in a bikini and saying they're changing the world. None of that does it for me, okay? I want more. Can I have it today? No. Can I have it next year? No. Am I going to see it before I die? Maybe. But for me, I don't especially stigmatize teenagers. I don't especially stigmatize the people who are wearing a bikini on the internet to earn a living. It's true that on a deep level, I just do not believe in personal happiness as the meaning of life. And I think that is, dangerous narcissism. Whereas someone who seems self-confident and collected in talking about something they have every reason to be self-confident and collected in talking about, I don't see that as indicating narcissism at all.